Here's how the story goes. We find out about a treasure in the Grand Line. There's no doubt. The pirate whose eye is on it, he'll sing. I'll be king of the pirates. I'm gonna be king. Dido, Dido, Dido.
Disease. It's one thing nobody wants anything to do with, but chances are pretty good that you'll come into contact with some disease at some point in your life. However, whether or not you can survive it, that's the question. There are a lot of different variables at work, but one thing is for certain: it's rarely ever pretty. Jump scares take on an entirely new meaning in our first case: exploding head syndrome. You're lying in bed just like any other night. You've closed your eyes and you've drifted off to sleep. It's going to be a good night. Just as you finally fully relaxed and the real world begins to fade away, there's a loud gunshot. You spring awake, terrified that someone has invaded your home and intends to kill you. Though it sounds like it happened right inside your room, nothing is there. It was all in your head. Exploding head syndrome, a rare condition where a person experiences an auditory hallucination of an explosion or an otherwise loud noise. The episodes may come in a number of different varieties, such as a gunshot, a bomb exploding, cymbals crashing, or even an earthquake tearing apart your house. Though the attacks can happen at any time during day or night, they are more likely to occur if you're falling asleep. Sufferers of exploding head syndrome are usually terrified of going to sleep at night, for good reason. This leads to a number of health issues and conditions such as insomnia. This anxiety over going to sleep, unfortunately, only increases the chances of an attack. Exploding head syndrome can show up at any point during your life, and it can vanish just as quickly for unknown reasons. But sufferers of this condition aren't the only ones afraid to go to sleep, such as in our next case: nodding disease. Perhaps you found yourself sitting in math class in school and you're incredibly bored. Your eyes begin to drift shut as you slowly start to lose consciousness. You just can't follow the lesson, it's just not interesting to you. And you begin to fall asleep. Your head dips forward, your eyes close, and all of a sudden, you snap back awake to wake yourself up so you don't get in trouble. Many people share this experience, but for those suffering from nodding disease, this experience is constant. First documented in Tanzania in the 1960s and now impacting Sudan and Uganda, nodding disease affects only children, typically between the ages of 5 and 15. Children struggle to stay awake, their heads often dipping as they drift off into unconsciousness. The children battling with this illness suffer from seizures which cause their heads to nod, aside from the simple struggle of trying to keep their heads upright. Nodding disease has only grown substantially since it was discovered in the 1960s. Thousands are affected and no one truly knows why. Families are often terrified as chances are very high that they will one day witness their own child nodding uncontrollably. Once the nodding begins, all growth is halted. The child will no longer seem to age. The brain will cease its development as well, leading to a number of crippling handicaps. Symptoms will often flare up when a child eats, which leads to children refusing to eat and becoming malnourished. Unfortunately, there is no known cause or cure for nodding disease, and people with it often die as children. A number of cases report that sufferers often fall unconscious at very bad times. Some children fall into cooking fires and burn alive, while others fall into water and drown. The disease is considered to be tremendously fatal and will kill without the need for an unfortunate accident. It's sad how disease can claim lives without any type of mercy, but not all diseases are designed to kill. That doesn't mean, however, that you won't wish you were dead, such as in our next case: Brainard diarrhea. Diarrhea, probably one of the more unpleasant conditions that all people will face at multiple points throughout their lives. In Brainard, Minnesota in 1983, 122 unlucky residents would find that this relatively common condition could take a very hellish turn for the worst. Explosive diarrhea. Due to its severe unpleasantness, it's the topic of a number of jokes, but nothing is funny about experiencing it 10 to 20 times a day. Sufferers of this condition, for an unknown reason, are suddenly hurled into a lifestyle that revolves entirely around the need to use the bathroom. Unfortunately, it's not always that simple, as Brainard's diarrhea will cause episodes so suddenly that unless you live on your toilet, you will end up going in your pants. The outbreak in 1983 baffled experts who have no explanation as to how it occurred, and since then there have been 10 more outbreaks, 9 of which have occurred in the United States. Fortunately, Brainard diarrhea isn't contagious, and boiling water during an outbreak is always suggested. Those unfortunate enough to contract whatever it might be that causes this condition will suffer, as you may be able to tell. 10 to 20 episodes of violent and uncontrollable explosive diarrhea a day, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Fortunately enough, the condition does resolve itself. Yes, in time, you will be just fine. You can get your life back on track. You can reconnect with friends that you might have lost. Oh yes, I forgot to mention one thing. Brainard diarrhea can last persistently, in full force, for years, essentially imprisoning you to your bathroom for what would seem like an eternity. To be confined indoors, never able to step foot into daylight comfortably, must be a terrible feeling. But I'm not just talking about our last case, but our next case. Vampire disease. Vampires, infinitely sexy and devilishly seductive. Well, perhaps that's what they're considered now, but there was once a time where vampires were horrific creatures that were meant to be feared. This was the curse of porphyria, a condition that causes the gums to recede to leave teeth appearing as fangs. Direct contact with sunlight will cause the flesh to blister and burn. Though scientists suggest that porphyria may be the result of a DNA mutation, some cases of horrific transformations are triggered by alcohol, drugs, infections, or even hormones such as estrogen. It's actually the result of improperly produced heme, which is an important component in hemoglobin, a protein in the blood which carries oxygen. To further solidify the vampire stereotype, a helpful treatment for porphyria is to be injected with healthy heme, which is present in healthy blood. Another possible way of getting healthy heme is by ingesting healthy blood, by drinking it. Because of these factors, it's believed that porphyria played a powerful role in substantiating vampire folklore. As before medical studies had advanced to what they are now, belief in such beings was much more common, and conditions such as porphyria were written off as an encounter with a monster. Though sufferers may look threatening and violent, they aren't. But that can't be said for our next case. Sleepy sickness. Feeling a bit under the weather, sore throat, headache, fever? Ah yes, the flu again. You're going to be sent to bed and you'll be feeling better in a week or two. Or perhaps you don't have the flu at all and you'll never feel better again. The sleepy sickness, otherwise known as encephalitis lethargica, is an illness that affected the world in epidemic proportions between 1915 and 1926, with no apparent cause. Symptoms presented themselves as general unease, but eventually developed double vision and an odd state of sleep. 1/3 of sufferers in this phase died from respiratory failure. Others who might have survived faced a fate much worse than death. Those who recovered didn't actually recover at all. That's because encephalitis lethargica is a multi-stage disorder. After rousing from their sleep state, sufferers wouldn't be the same person. They wouldn't have a care for life, they couldn't concentrate, but this was only the eye of the storm. The worst was yet to come. As the disease progressed, the brain continued to change violently. Some victims would begin to show sinister characteristics: destructiveness, lying, self-mutilation, and hurting others who crossed them were typical signs. Still, however, not the worst. Some victims turn to become immensely abusive, raping others regardless of gender and murdering. One case even went so mad that they ripped their own eyes out of their head. Fortunately, sleepy sickness hasn't had any epidemic-level resurgence. However, isolated cases do still exist. It just goes to show you that no matter what you do or how you might live your life, when it comes to diseases, you can only ever reduce your risk, not eliminate it. And sometimes, you can't even do that. That's all for now. Remember, you may not believe it, but anything is possible in a world so seriously strange. I'm Rob Dyke, and I will see you next Wednesday. Please show the artist of this series some support by subscribing to our YouTube channel linked in the description below. Also, be sure to click subscribe on screen now to subscribe to my channel, because you won't want to miss what's next.